We've looked at all the controls contained in a variety of mixers, and we've looked at how a mixer fits into the complete sound reinforcement picture. Now we get to the fun stuff, where all of this raw material gets connected, and all of the individual sounds from your mics and instruments are assembled into a unified mix for your audience to hear. The Geyser Stop Music Festival in Northern California is the venue we've chosen to put all of our explorations into sound reinforcement to the test. A real gig with real issues and a wide variety of real players and a real audience.
Planning is everything. Before you even put the equipment in the van, you need to figure out what you're going to need for the show and the venue in question, basically how big of a system, and then figure out how you're going to set that system up. Most importantly, make sure you have all the cables you need in order to do so. In fact, it's a good idea to throw in some extra cables. The venue we've chosen for this Connecting Up the System scene is an outdoor festival where several very diverse bands and musicians are going to be performing. The space is fairly small, and around 300 people are expected. Here's the equipment we've chosen for the job. 2 Yamaha P3500S power amps, 1 Yamaha P5000S power amp, 2 Yamaha SW118 subwoofers, 2 Yamaha S115 main speakers, 2 Yamaha SM12 monitor wedges, a Yamaha MG324 mixer, which is an expanded version of the mixer we used during the main mixer scene in this program, an effects rack, and a whole heap of cables. Even at the most bizarre of venues, essentially the stage will be at one end and the audience at the other. Having schlepped the gear out of the van, place the speakers loosely where you need them on either side of the stage. The mixer needs to be in a place where the engineer can both see and hear the stage well, but also be as unobtrusive to the audience as possible. If you're going to be using monitor speakers, place them alongside each performer that needs them. Power amps should be placed close to the speakers to keep the cable run short. Make sure the amps are accessible, but don't interfere with the performers on stage. Once your speakers, monitors, and power amps are in place, it's time to start hooking up the cables. Hook the speaker cables up between the power amps and the speakers, and between the power amp and the monitors. Once those are done, it's time to bring out the snake. A snake is just a series of cables bound together that give you a series of sends, that is, cables that carry signals from the stage to the mixer, and then a series of returns, cables for getting signals from the mixer back to the stage, like your main and monitor mix. A big advantage of using the snake is that all your cables are housed in a single, larger cable that's easily run from the stage to the mixer, and it's easy to tape to the floor to keep people from tripping over it. Hook the returns from your mixer to the main power amps and the power amp you're using for your monitors. Depending on the kind of snake you end up using, these connections will either be balanced XLR cables or 1/4-inch line cables. Once your returns are set, the next step is to get your mics out and set up on stage. Place your vocal mics in the general area where your singers will be, right by the monitors. The mics get patched into the snake head using XLR cables. This process is repeated as the rest of the band gets set up. Take your mics from the drums and the guitarist and patch them into the snake, as well as instrument feeds from your bass player and keyboard player. Now that you're all cabled up, we can switch everything on and start testing.
To the untrained observer, a sound check is just an excuse for various members of the road crew to strut about on stage before the show going
1, 2, 2, 1
into the mics. But that's actually just the tip of this particular iceberg. A sound check, as its name implies, is a critically important time for the person operating the out-front sound and the musicians on stage, and yes, even if you're one and the same person, to make sure everything is sounding as it should in order to produce a great show. We've already looked at the controls in a typical channel strip, and we've seen how these are used in practice. Now we're going to look at a whole range of different instruments and sound sources, and see how these will be handled during the sound check.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
There are few more thankless tasks than being a professional monitor engineer. If you do your job perfectly, no one notices. If you mess up, or more to the point, if a performer messes up, it's the monitor engineer who gets it in the neck and becomes the world's biggest bad guy for the night. Monitoring is all about letting performers on stage hear what they're doing so that they can perform well. And to say this is a delicate balance of both technology and psychology is a bit like saying talking politics or religion with people you don't know can be awkward. Ideally, each musician on stage needs their own monitor mix. One person may want to hear predominantly their own vocal with just a tiny bit of everything else, plus say some guitar to fill out the sound. Another musician may want lots of keyboards and a fairly even balance of all the vocals. Unless you're playing large venues, where there actually is a separate monitor console at the side of the stage, your ability to deliver a separate monitor mix for each performer depends on how many separate monitor or auxiliary buses there are on your mixer. If you need 3 individual monitor mixes, you'll need 3 individual monitor or aux buses. As we saw in the mixer scene, you set up a monitor mix using the pre-fade aux bus. The mix itself governed by how much of each channel you send to that particular aux bus. A stage environment can be fairly hostile to the controlled delivery and reception of sound because performers need to be able to move about the stage. And doing so can dramatically change the blend of what they're hearing with each step. Not only that, what they need to hear can change from song to song, and indeed from night to night depending on what and how the rest of the players are playing. This is all tricky stuff, and frankly it's safe to say there's no such thing as the perfect type of monitoring system. So from our choices of imperfect systems, let's start at the most commonly used, floor monitors, or as they're sometimes called, stage wedges. Wedges are relatively inexpensive. They're easy to move about, and they're simple to operate. These Yamaha SM12V monitors use a 12-inch driver and a 2-inch compression driver mounted in a bass reflex type enclosure. The flared horn will give you plenty of cut and good dispersion. Even so, positioning is crucial. Try to position them so they don't point directly into the microphones, in which case they'll cause feedback. If you can, in fact, point them towards the dead spot of a cardioid pattern mic. Whereas stage wedges operate at a volume level suitable for one performer at a time, side fills operate on the principle of providing general coverage. In other words, a general level of sound to the stage that can be heard by anyone and everyone. Side fills are mainly used today on stages where there's lots of movement, i.e. dancers or just very animated performers. The problem with side fills is that their mix obviously has to be general rather than specific, and also that they can, unless you're very careful, create a high level of onstage sound that will bleed into microphones and make it very tough to control the out-front sound. And what is a side fill? Side fills can be pretty well any type of large, full-range PA cabinet. Finally, we come to these guys, so named in-ear monitors. This takes personal monitoring to the ultimate height, where not only can you be supplied with a crisp and clear mix that you, and only you, can hear, but it also creates your own personal universe. In-ears are great for keeping stage volumes at an all-time low, but not everyone feels comfortable wearing them. In-ears are increasingly popular with professionals who really know how to use them.
There are some problems with in-ears. It is not a cure-all. As an example, people when they put in in-ears they feel masked. They feel like they're in a fishbowl. So in order to help them with that, you're going to have to add microphones like ambient mics so that you get the room and the crowd to come back in. Things that weren't needed to be mic'd before might need to be mic'd now. Things like, I don't know, electric guitar, all of a sudden, acoustically you could hear it perfectly. But when you put in ears, now you can't hear it as well. So now you may need to add that into your monitors to hear them.
Monitoring is an intensely personal issue, and one logical application of available technology is to put the mix back in the hands of the performer, with so-named personal monitor mixers. People have been trying to perfect these for many years now. If nothing else, it at least takes some of the heat off the often hapless monitor engineer, but you have to wonder whether performers on stage are best left to the art of performing, as opposed to the more cerebral art of mixing. A good starting point for setting up your monitor system is to turn it all off. That's right, turn it off, and allow the musicians to adjust their placement and levels of their instruments to hear and interact with each other without the benefit of a monitor system. Then add in the monitors as needed for help. An added benefit is a lower stage volume, allowing a clearer out-front sound.
Start mixing monitors is I stand at the position of the person I'm going to mix for. So if I'm going to do a bass mix as an example, I stand with the bass player and I listen to what he's hearing acoustically. If he's got enough drums and he's got enough keyboards already, there's no sense in adding that back in his mix. And stand and listen at each individual player on stage's position to see what they need. Because an artist will tell you, I want to hear everything. And that doesn't mean you put everything in their mix. What that means is you add to their mix what you will make a full blend of sound for them at that position. So that's the first thing. Walk around on stage, learn everybody's environment.
No monitor system is foolproof, and once the show is in progress, a problem can really only be fixed by one of three ways: turn them up, down, or off. So try and spend some time before the show getting as good and reliable a sound and mix as you can. And we'll give the last words on this subject to Randy.
Fix a problem on stage mechanically first. That's much better than using electronics to fix a problem. So as an example, you have a feedback problem. If you can move a monitor, if you can move a speaker, if you can move a microphone, if you can move something physically to get rid of that feedback problem, it's much more effective than trying to do it with equalization.